Rain hammered against the windows of Daniel Mercer's farmhouse, blurring the world beyond the glass into shifting shadows. Thunder rolled across the empty countryside, rattling the old wooden walls that had sheltered him for nearly a decade. Nights like this always unsettled him. Storms had a way of pulling forgotten memories from places he had buried deep inside himself, just as surely as the earth had hidden its own terrible secret. 10 years. That was how long he had lived with blood on his conscience. 10 years since Evelyn vanished without a trace, leaving behind whispers, unanswered questions, and a grieving family who never stopped searching. The police eventually closed the investigation. The town gradually stopped talking. Missing posters faded from bulletin boards. Life moved on for everyone except the man who knew exactly where she rested. Daniel had buried more than a body that night. He had buried his old life. Now 46, he followed the same routines every evening. Lock the doors before sunset. Check every window twice. Drink exactly 1 glass of whiskey while reading the newspaper. Go to bed before midnight. Predictability kept his thoughts under control. Routine was the only thing stronger than guilt. He rarely spoke to neighbors beyond polite greetings. There were no close friends. No family visits. Solitude had become both punishment and protection. Outside, lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the line of pine trees stretching behind the house. Daniel instinctively looked away. Those trees reminded him too much of another forest. Another hole in the ground. Another storm. He swallowed the memory with the last sip of whiskey and reached for the lamp switch. The lights flickered. Darkness swallowed the room. A second later, the emergency generator hummed to life, bathing the living room in a dull yellow glow. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps. Not loud. Not desperate. Almost patient. Daniel frowned. Nobody visited this late, especially during weather like this. Another 3 knocks echoed through the house. His heartbeat quickened for reasons he couldn't explain. He approached the front door carefully, peering through the narrow window beside it. At first he saw only rain. Then lightning split the sky. A woman stood on the porch. She wore a dark coat soaked from the storm, strands of wet auburn hair clinging to her face. Her head remained lowered, hiding her expression. Daniel opened the door only a few inches. "Can I help you?" The woman slowly lifted her head. His breath stopped. The world around him disappeared. It was Evelyn. Not someone similar. Not someone who merely resembled her. Every feature matched the woman whose face had haunted his dreams for 10 endless years. The gentle green eyes. The small scar above her right eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident. The tiny beauty mark near her left cheek. Even the silver necklace rested against her throat exactly as it had the night she disappeared. Daniel staggered backward. "No." The word escaped as little more than a whisper. His fingers gripped the edge of the door until they hurt. "This isn't possible." The woman simply watched him. Rain streamed from her coat onto the porch. She neither smiled nor frowned. "Daniel," she said quietly. Her voice. It was unchanged. Soft. Calm. Painfully familiar. His knees weakened. He had imagined hearing that voice countless nights over the years, usually after too much whiskey or another nightmare. But imagination never carried such terrifying clarity. "You." He struggled to breathe. "I buried you." Silence followed. The woman's expression barely shifted. "I know," she answered. A violent tremor ran through Daniel's body. His mind searched desperately for explanations. A cruel prank. A hallucination. Someone wearing makeup. An elaborate scam. Anything except the impossible truth standing before him. "You can't be Evelyn." She tilted her head slightly. "Can't I?" Lightning flashed again, briefly revealing every detail of her face. Not older by much. Perhaps a little thinner. A sadness lingered in her eyes that hadn't existed before. Otherwise. Exactly the same. Daniel noticed the necklace again. His stomach tightened. He remembered fastening it around her neck on their 5th wedding anniversary. He remembered seeing it covered in dirt beneath the moonlight. He remembered leaving it there. His chest tightened until each breath became painful. "What do you want?" he finally managed. She looked beyond him into the warm house, then back into his terrified eyes. "I've been waiting a very long time for this." Another silence settled between them while rain drummed endlessly on the porch roof. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He wanted to slam the door. He wanted to run. Instead, he stood frozen, unable to move. The woman stepped one pace closer. Close enough for him to smell rainwater mixed with the faint lavender perfume Evelyn had always worn. Then she leaned toward him. Barely above a whisper, she spoke 6 words. "They'll never find me, Daniel, remember?" The exact words. The final words Evelyn had spoken the night he killed her. Daniel slammed the front door shut and staggered backward, his heartbeat pounding so violently it drowned out the storm. By the time he forced himself to look through the window again, the porch was empty. Rain fell in relentless sheets, washing away every trace of the woman who had spoken with Evelyn's voice. He searched the yard with a flashlight, circling the house twice despite the downpour. There were no footprints in the mud, no tire tracks on the gravel road, and no sign that anyone had been there at all. Yet he had heard her. Seen her. She had spoken the exact words that haunted every nightmare. Daniel barely slept. Each creak of the farmhouse sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind became another knock at the door. Before dawn broke through the clouds, he had already made his decision. There was only one place that could prove he was losing his mind. Or prove something far worse. He grabbed his truck keys, threw a shovel into the bed out of habit more than necessity, and drove toward Blackwood Forest. The winding roads were nearly deserted. Mist floated above the wet pavement, and broken branches littered the shoulders after the night's storm. Daniel kept checking his rearview mirror, convinced another vehicle was following him, but every glance revealed only empty road disappearing into gray morning light. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. 10 years earlier, he had driven this same route with Evelyn's body wrapped in an old canvas tarp. He remembered every turn, every bump, every desperate prayer that nobody would see him. He had chosen the burial site because it was forgotten land, surrounded by towering pines where hunters rarely ventured. He had believed nature would hide his crime forever. The truck stopped beside the narrow dirt trail. Daniel climbed out and stared into the silent forest. Everything looked unchanged. The towering pines swayed gently. Birds sang somewhere overhead. The scent of wet earth filled the cool air. It seemed impossible that such a peaceful place held the darkest moment of his life. He followed the familiar path, counting landmarks he had never managed to forget. A fallen oak. A cluster of moss-covered boulders. The crooked pine scarred by lightning decades ago. Then he stopped. His blood turned cold. The ground ahead had been disturbed. The shallow depression he remembered was gone. Fresh dirt covered the clearing. Someone had dug there. Daniel stumbled forward, dropping to his knees beside the open pit. The grave had been carefully excavated. Not by animals. Not by erosion. By human hands. The edges were clean. The soil had been neatly piled before recent rain partially flattened it. Whoever had opened the grave knew exactly where to dig. "No," Daniel whispered. He climbed into the pit, ignoring the mud soaking through his clothes. The space where Evelyn's body had rested was empty. Nothing remained. No bones. No scraps of clothing. No canvas tarp. Only a hollow cavity carved into the earth. His breathing became frantic. This can't be happening. His fingers clawed desperately through the damp soil, as though the missing body might somehow reappear beneath another layer of dirt. Instead, something metallic caught the morning light. Daniel froze. Carefully brushing away the mud, he uncovered a small gold wedding ring. His wedding ring. The one he had slipped onto Evelyn's finger during their ceremony beneath a summer sky 12 years before her disappearance. He remembered trying to remove it before burying her. It had refused to come off. He had finally given up, convinced no one would ever find it. Yet now it rested alone in the disturbed earth. Clean. Almost polished. As though someone had deliberately left it behind. Daniel stared at the ring lying in his shaking palm. It was no accident. Whoever removed the body wanted him to find this. A cold realization settled over him with terrifying certainty. Someone else knew exactly what he had done that stormy night 10 years ago. Someone had uncovered the grave long before he returned. And someone had chosen the perfect moment to let him know the secret was no longer buried. Daniel drove home with the wedding ring clenched so tightly in his fist that its edges cut into his palm. The pain barely registered. Every mile between Blackwood Forest and the farmhouse only deepened the impossible truth. Someone had opened Evelyn's grave. Someone had taken her body. And the woman who had stood on his porch somehow knew the final words spoken on the night he believed he had buried her forever. He could no longer wait for answers. The following evening, Daniel parked his truck across the street from the small motel where he had seen the mysterious woman checking in earlier that day. He kept the engine off and watched through rain-speckled windows, determined to prove she was a fraud. If she slipped, if she forgot some detail of Evelyn's life, he would finally have something solid to hold on to. An hour passed before she emerged. She wore simple jeans and a gray sweater, her damp auburn hair tied loosely behind her neck. She walked with the same calm confidence Evelyn once carried, never appearing rushed or nervous. Daniel followed at a distance as she wandered through the quiet streets toward the town square. She stopped outside an old bakery. Without looking over her shoulder, she smiled faintly. "You always hated following people," she said. Daniel froze. "I learned because of you." She turned to face him. I wondered how long it would take. His mouth felt dry. "Who are you?" "You already know." "No," he snapped. "Evelyn is dead." Her expression softened. "Then why are you here?" Daniel had no answer. Instead, he searched her face for imperfections. A disguise. Cosmetic surgery. Anything that explained the impossible resemblance. She quietly rolled up her left sleeve. A thin white scar crossed her forearm. "You remember this?" Daniel stared. Years ago, Evelyn had sliced her arm while repairing a broken fence beside their barn. He had rushed her to the emergency clinic himself. The scar had remained ever since. His breathing became uneven. "You could have learned that." She nodded. "From whom?" He remained silent. She stepped closer. "You still keep your mother's pocket watch in the kitchen drawer because you never trusted yourself to wear it." Daniel's eyes widened. "No one knows that." "You planted roses beneath the bedroom window because I said the room smelled empty." His pulse quickened. "You cried after your father died, but only once, when no one was watching." Daniel stumbled backward. Each memory struck with terrifying precision. They were moments never shared with neighbors, friends, or police. Private fragments belonging only to husband and wife. "You can't know these things." "I lived them." Daniel shook his head violently. "No." She looked at him with unmistakable sadness. "I wish that answer made this easier." Across the street, unnoticed by either of them, a young woman lowered the camera hanging around her neck. Mia Lawson had been covering town events for the local newspaper for 3 years. Most days brought little beyond council meetings and charity dinners. But rumors traveled quickly through small communities. A woman declared legally dead had supposedly returned. That rumor demanded investigation. Mia discreetly photographed Daniel and the stranger before ducking into a nearby cafe. She opened archived newspaper files on her tablet, quickly finding faded headlines from a decade earlier. "Local woman missing. Search continues." Case grows cold. She frowned. According to every official record, Evelyn Mercer had vanished without explanation. Yet the woman outside looked exactly like the photographs. Either someone had created an elaborate deception, or history had become impossible. Back in the square, Daniel's fear had turned into quiet desperation. "What do you want from me?" The woman hesitated. "The truth." "I already know the truth." "No," she whispered. "You only know what you believed." Before Daniel could respond, she walked away toward the motel without another word. Hidden behind the tinted windows of a dark SUV parked at the edge of the square, another pair of eyes followed them both. A man lowered a pair of binoculars and made a brief phone call. "They've met," he said quietly. A pause followed. Then he listened before answering. "No. Neither of them suspects they're being watched." The call ended. The SUV pulled away without attracting attention, leaving Daniel, the mysterious woman, and journalist Mia Lawson unknowingly moving toward the same dangerous truth. The black SUV disappeared into traffic, but its silent departure left an invisible shadow over the town. Daniel never noticed it. His thoughts remained trapped inside the impossible conversation he had just shared. Every private memory the woman recalled had chipped away at the certainty he had clung to for 10 years. Yet one undeniable fact refused to change. He had buried Evelyn. The next afternoon, Daniel found her sitting alone on a weathered bench beside the old riverside park. The river flowed quietly beneath gray skies, carrying fallen leaves toward places neither of them could see. She watched the water without acknowledging his approach. "You knew I'd come," Daniel said. "I knew you needed answers." He remained standing. "Then start talking." She nodded slowly. "I didn't die." Daniel laughed bitterly. "I watched you." "You watched someone." His expression hardened. "I carried your body." "You carried the body you believed was mine." The words lingered between them like cold mist. Daniel searched her face for deception, but found only exhaustion. She folded her hands together. "After that night, I spent years moving from place to place. Different towns. Different names. I trusted no one." "Why?" "Because I couldn't." "Who were you hiding from?" Her eyes drifted toward the river. "I can't tell you." "Can't or won't?" "They're almost the same." Daniel's frustration grew. "You disappear for 10 years, then suddenly appear at my doorstep expecting me to believe impossible stories?" "I expected nothing." She reached into her coat pocket and removed a faded photograph. It showed the two of them smiling beside a lake during their honeymoon. The edges were worn from years of handling. "I carried this everywhere." Daniel stared. That photograph had disappeared the same night Evelyn vanished. "Where did you get it?" "I never lost it." His heartbeat quickened. "You said you were hiding." "I was." "From who?" She hesitated. "They thought I knew something." "What?" "I still don't know." Daniel frowned. Nothing she said fit together. If someone had hunted her for 10 years, why return now? If she had escaped, why risk revealing herself? If she truly remembered everything, why avoid every important answer? "You keep saying they," Daniel said quietly. "Who are they?" Her face suddenly drained of color. She looked past him. For a brief moment, genuine fear replaced the calm expression she had worn since returning. "They found me." Daniel turned sharply. The park appeared almost empty. An elderly couple walked a distant path. A jogger crossed the bridge. Nothing seemed unusual. When he looked back, Evelyn's breathing had become shallow. "We have to leave." Before Daniel could respond, a deafening crack shattered the afternoon. The wooden bench exploded beside them. Splinters flew through the air. For one terrifying second, Daniel couldn't understand what had happened. Then another sharp report echoed across the river. Someone was shooting. "Run!" Evelyn shouted. They sprinted toward a line of trees as frightened pedestrians screamed and scattered in every direction. Daniel grabbed Evelyn's arm, pulling her behind the thick trunk of an old oak just as another bullet struck the ground nearby. His pulse thundered. "This isn't possible." "It is now." She struggled to catch her breath. "They're faster than I thought." Daniel looked toward the opposite riverbank but saw only parked cars and empty sidewalks. The shooter had vanished. Sirens wailed in the distance. Within minutes, police vehicles surrounded the park while officers searched every nearby street. No weapon was found. No suspect was seen. Witnesses offered conflicting stories. Some claimed they heard fireworks. Others insisted they saw a man running through nearby alleys. None agreed on anything. As paramedics checked Evelyn for injuries, Daniel noticed a small tear along her coat sleeve. The bullet had missed her arm by inches. Across the growing crowd, Mia Lawson lowered her camera with shaking hands. She had arrived moments before the attack, hoping to question the mysterious woman. Instead, she had photographed the chaos. One image caught her attention. In the background, partially hidden behind a row of parked vehicles, stood the same dark SUV she had seen the previous evening. By the time she looked up again, it was gone. Daniel watched Evelyn being escorted toward an ambulance. For the first time since her return, he no longer feared only the past. Someone wanted her dead before she could reveal where she had truly been during those missing 10 years. The attempted shooting at the Riverside Park transformed an impossible mystery into an active criminal investigation. News spread rapidly through town, but the police released few details. Daniel returned home shaken, unable to erase the image of bullets tearing through the bench where he and the woman had been sitting only seconds before. Whether she was truly Evelyn or not, someone clearly wanted her silenced. That single fact frightened him more than anything else. At the police station, Detective Lucas Bennett requested the dusty archive box labeled Evelyn Mercer, missing person, closed. The file had not been opened in years. As he carefully turned each yellowing page, small inconsistencies began emerging like cracks beneath old paint. Daniel's original statement claimed he had spent the evening alone repairing farm equipment. Yet a deputy's forgotten field note mentioned fresh mud covering Daniel's truck tires despite clear weather around the farmhouse. Another report described scratches on the truck bed that investigators never explained. Neither detail had appeared in the final summary. Lucas frowned. Someone had quietly dismissed evidence that deserved closer attention. He continued reading. Volunteer search teams had covered nearly every section of Blackwood Forest except one remote area marked inaccessible after a storm. The map showed the exact stretch of woodland where Daniel had secretly buried the body. The search had come painfully close. Lucas leaned back. Either Daniel had been incredibly lucky, or someone had unknowingly guided investigators away from the truth. Meanwhile, Daniel stood inside his basement, staring at an old wooden chest hidden behind shelves of paint cans and rusted tools. He had not opened it in 10 years. His hands trembled as he lifted the lid. Inside lay the final remnants of that terrible night. A blood-stained flannel shirt wrapped inside plastic. An old flashlight. The broken clasp from Evelyn's necklace. A disposable camera he had forgotten existed. He felt sick. He should have destroyed everything years ago. Instead, fear had convinced him keeping the evidence nearby gave him control over it. Now it threatened to destroy him. Without hesitation, Daniel carried the box outside to a rusted metal barrel behind the barn. He soaked everything with gasoline. One match. That was all it took. Orange flames swallowed the memories. The shirt blackened. The flashlight melted. Plastic curled into smoke. Daniel watched silently until nothing recognizable remained. For the first time in years, he believed he had erased the last physical traces of his crime. Then his phone vibrated. An unknown number. He hesitated before answering. No one spoke. Only slow breathing. Finally, a calm voice broke the silence. Fire doesn't erase copies. Daniel's blood froze. What? I hope you enjoyed the bonfire. The line disconnected. Daniel stared at the phone. His knees weakened. Someone had known exactly what he was burning. Someone had been watching his house. He spun toward the nearby fields. Nothing moved except tall grass swaying beneath the evening breeze. Panic overtook reason. He searched the property for hidden cameras, footprints, or parked vehicles, finding nothing. Every shadow suddenly felt alive. Across town, Mia Lawson sat inside the newspaper office studying photographs she had taken over the past 2 days. One image from the park attack showed the dark SUV in remarkable detail. Enlarging the picture revealed part of its license plate. Another photograph captured the same vehicle parked outside Daniel's farmhouse earlier that morning. It was not coincidence. Someone had followed both Daniel and the mysterious woman. Before she could investigate further, Detective Bennett appeared unexpectedly. I hear you've been asking questions. Mia nodded cautiously. I've also been finding strange answers. Lucas placed Evelyn's old case file onto the desk. I think someone wanted this investigation forgotten. She looked at the thick folder. And now? He closed it slowly. Now I think someone is willing to kill to keep it buried. Neither of them noticed the figure standing across the street, watching through the office window. Inside a parked black SUV, a camera lens focused on both faces before clicking softly. Another file joined an already thick folder filled with photographs. Daniel. The woman calling herself Evelyn. Detective Bennett. Journalist Mia Lawson. Every move carefully documented. The hunter who had believed himself untouchable was no longer chasing answers. Without realizing it, Daniel had become someone else's prey. Daniel barely left his farmhouse after the anonymous phone call. Every unfamiliar vehicle passing along the quiet road made him glance through the curtains. Every ringing phone sent another wave of panic through his chest. He had spent 10 years believing his greatest enemy was guilt. Now he feared someone far more dangerous had been watching him long before Evelyn's impossible return. Across town, Mia Lawson refused to let the mystery rest. She spent the morning inside the county records office, searching through aging newspaper archives, property deeds, and forgotten birth records. Most files led nowhere, but one faded adoption ledger from nearly 40 years earlier caught her attention. A page had been partially torn away. Only fragments remained. 2 female infants. Same birth date. One entry crossed out in black ink. The other rewritten under a different surname. Mia frowned. Twins. She requested additional files, but the elderly clerk shook his head apologetically. Those records disappeared years ago. Disappeared? They were transferred. To where? No destination was ever listed. Something about the missing documents felt deliberate. Later that afternoon, Mia drove to St. Catherine's Children's Home, a brick building that had closed decades earlier. Most of its records had been boxed and stored in a damp basement awaiting historical preservation. After nearly an hour of searching, she uncovered an old photo album covered in dust. Inside were dozens of faded photographs. Children lined up in school uniforms. Holiday celebrations. Birthday parties. Then she stopped turning pages. One photograph showed 2 little girls standing side by side. They looked almost identical. The same auburn hair. The same bright green eyes. The same unmistakable smile. Written beneath the picture in faded blue ink were 2 names. Evelyn. Claire. Mia's heartbeat quickened. She carefully photographed the page before continuing. Several later photographs showed only Evelyn. Claire had vanished from every image without explanation. No notes. No obituary. No adoption record. Nothing. It was as though one child had been quietly erased from history. Meanwhile, Detective Lucas Bennett traced ownership records connected to the orphanage. Again and again, one name surfaced. The Ashcroft Foundation. An influential family whose wealth stretched back generations. Charities. Hospitals. Political donations. Schools. Every trail seemed to lead toward them. Yet references to Claire disappeared whenever their involvement appeared. Lucas found the pattern impossible to ignore. Someone with power had rewritten the past. Daniel, unable to suppress his growing desperation, secretly arranged another meeting with the woman claiming to be Evelyn. They met inside an abandoned church just before sunset. Dust floated through fading light streaming across broken wooden pews. Daniel placed the recovered wedding ring on the altar. "If you're Evelyn," he said quietly, "tell me whose ring this is." She stared at it for several long seconds. "My sister always admired it." Daniel looked up sharply. "Sister?" A painful silence followed. "I wasn't supposed to tell you yet. You said you never had a sister." "I was told I didn't." Daniel's confusion deepened. "You remember everything else but forget having a sister?" "I didn't forget." She lowered her eyes. "They made sure I never knew." His breathing slowed. A terrifying possibility began forming inside his mind. "What if?" he whispered. She met his gaze. "What if I buried someone else?" The woman said nothing. Her silence felt heavier than any answer. Daniel remembered that stormy night with desperate clarity. The darkness. The rain. The shouting. Blood on trembling hands. He had never looked at the face for long. Fear had driven every decision afterward. For the first time in 10 years, certainty abandoned him completely. Had he truly killed Evelyn? Or had someone manipulated him into believing he had? Outside the church, hidden behind overgrown hedges, a camera shutter clicked twice. The unseen observer lowered the lens and quietly slipped away before either of them emerged. That evening, Mia spread copies of the orphanage photographs across her dining room table beside archived adoption records and newspaper clippings. The similarities were undeniable. 2 identical girls. One officially documented. One systematically erased. She whispered the forgotten name aloud. Claire. At the same moment, Daniel sat alone holding the wedding ring, haunted by a question more terrifying than any ghost. If Evelyn was alive, then whose body had disappeared from the grave beneath the pines? The answer promised to unravel far more than a murder, reaching into secrets powerful enough to erase entire lives. The question followed Daniel everywhere after he left the abandoned church. If the woman standing before him truly was Evelyn, then whose remains had rested beneath the pines for 10 long years? Every memory he trusted now seemed uncertain, distorted by panic and darkness. Across town, Mia Lawson and Detective Lucas Bennett reached the same conclusion from different directions. Only science could separate truth from deception. Lucas arranged for DNA testing under the pretense of confirming the mysterious woman's identity. She agreed without protest, calmly allowing a nurse to collect a cheek swab. Daniel reluctantly provided his own sample for comparison, while investigators retrieved preserved biological material from Evelyn's old medical records stored at the county hospital. The waiting felt endless. 3 days later, Lucas, Mia, Daniel, and the woman gathered inside a quiet conference room at the police station. Rain tapped gently against the windows, an eerie reminder of the storm that had begun this nightmare all over again. The forensic specialist entered carrying a sealed folder. "The results are conclusive," she said. Daniel gripped the edge of the table. "Is she Evelyn?" The specialist hesitated. "Not exactly." Silence settled across the room. She opened the report. "The DNA confirms that the woman is biologically related to Evelyn Mercer." Daniel exhaled sharply. "But she is not the same individual whose hospital records we used." Mia leaned forward. "What kind of relationship?" The specialist turned another page. "They are identical twins." No one spoke. The words seemed impossible to absorb. Daniel stared at the woman across the table. She lowered her eyes but showed no surprise.
Lucas broke the silence. Identical twins share nearly identical DNA. How were you able to distinguish them?
We compared preserved neonatal blood samples that were archived separately from later medical records. Claire carefully unfolded Evelyn's final letter while Mia Lawson stood beside her, barely breathing. The handwriting remained steady despite the fear that must have surrounded its author. Only a single name appeared beneath the opening sentence. Charles Ashcroft. Detective Lucas Bennett received a scanned copy within minutes. The name immediately matched decades of financial records, adoption files, and charitable foundations he had already been investigating. Charles Ashcroft, the respected patriarch of the influential family, had quietly controlled St. Catherine's Children's Home through a network of private trusts. Everything suddenly aligned. The erased records. The separated twins. The forged adoption documents. The anonymous letters that destroyed Daniel's marriage. The surveillance. Even the opened grave. Lucas assembled a search warrant before sunset. Inside Ashcroft Manor, investigators uncovered locked filing cabinets hidden behind a false wall in Charles's private study. The documents revealed payments to orphanage administrators, forged birth certificates, and signed confidentiality agreements stretching back more than 30 years. One folder contained photographs of Evelyn secretly needing lawyers. Another documented Claire's movements under false identities. A final envelope held copies of every anonymous letter sent to Daniel before the murder. The affair had never existed. Every accusation had been manufactured to isolate Evelyn before she exposed the truth. Charles Ashcroft offered no resistance when officers confronted him. He merely sighed. "I protected my family's future." "You destroyed countless lives," Lucas replied. Charles lowered his eyes. If the twins had remained together, inheritance claims would have divided everything. Powerful families survive because difficult decisions are made early. Lucas stared at him in disbelief. "You separated children. I preserved a legacy. You manipulated an innocent man into becoming a killer." For the first time, Charles remained silent. Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone inside another interview room, waiting for the inevitable. Lucas entered carrying the completed investigation. "We know what happened." Daniel looked up. "I know enough. You were manipulated. I still buried her." His voice carried no anger, only exhaustion. "I chose fear over truth. No conspiracy forced that decision." Lucas nodded quietly. "The court will consider everything." Daniel managed a faint, broken smile. "I've already been serving my sentence for 10 years. Hours later, Daniel formally pleaded guilty to unlawful killing and concealment of a body. His confession, combined with the new evidence, finally closed the longest investigation in the town's history. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded every entrance. Mia refused every interview. Some stories deserved patience before publication. Claire stood alone beneath the courthouse steps, watching officers escort Charles Ashcroft toward a waiting police vehicle. He paused beside her. "I gave you a better life than the orphanage ever could." Claire met his gaze without hesitation. "You didn't give me a life." Her voice remained calm. "You stole one." Charles looked away for the first time. As the vehicle departed, Claire felt no triumph. Only grief. She had found her sister too late. The truth had survived. Evelyn had not. Several days later, investigators returned one final time to Blackwood Forest. Guided by Daniel's confession and fresh forensic evidence, they carefully searched the area surrounding the disturbed grave. Although the missing remains were never recovered, additional evidence confirmed that someone connected to Charles Ashcroft had secretly removed the body years earlier to eliminate any chance of future identification. The last physical proof had vanished forever. Yet the truth no longer depended upon a grave. It lived in confessions, letters, photographs, and surviving witnesses. As Daniel was transported to begin serving his sentence, he looked once toward the distant line of pine trees visible beyond the courthouse windows. "I hope she forgives me," he whispered. No one answered.
Justice had finally arrived after 10 painful years.
But it could never restore Evelyn's stolen future, erase Claire's stolen childhood, or free Daniel from the burden he would carry for the rest of his life. Only one chapter remained, and with it, the final chance for those still living to decide whether truth alone could ever become a form of forgiveness. 6 months passed before the town finally stopped treating the Mercer case as breaking news. The court proceedings ended with convictions that reached far beyond Daniel's confession. Charles Ashcroft died in prison before his appeal could be heard, taking many unanswered secrets with him. Several former associates faced charges for document fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Newspapers called it one of the greatest criminal deceptions in the county's history. For those whose lives had been shattered, however, no verdict felt complete. Daniel settled into the slow routine of prison life with quiet acceptance. He never appealed his sentence, never sought sympathy, and never blamed anyone else for the choice he made on that storm-filled night. Although manipulation had guided him toward suspicion, he understood that anger, fear, and pride had been his own. Every week he wrote a letter addressed to Evelyn. He knew no one would ever read them. Still, he filled page after page with apologies he should have spoken years earlier. He wrote about the farmhouse, the roses beneath the bedroom window, and the dreams that still woke him before dawn. Sometimes he imagined Evelyn smiling as she once had before lies poisoned their marriage. Other nights he remembered only the sound of rain and the terrible silence that followed. The prison chaplain asked him once whether writing brought peace. Daniel quietly answered, "No. It reminds me what peace costs." Across town, Mia Lawson finished the investigation that had consumed nearly every waking hour since the mysterious woman first appeared outside Daniel's house. She spent months verifying documents, interviewing investigators, and comparing forgotten records with newly uncovered evidence. When the book was finally published, it carried a simple title: The Sisters They Tried to Erase. It revealed how greed had separated identical twins, how forged letters had destroyed a marriage, and how powerful people had manipulated innocent lives to protect wealth and reputation. Readers searched for heroes within its pages. Mia deliberately refused to create any. She wrote that every person involved had failed someone they loved, and every act of silence allowed another tragedy to grow. The truth deserved honesty more than comfort. Claire read the finished book alone in her motel room before quietly closing the final page. She thanked Mia for telling Evelyn's story without turning grief into spectacle. A week later, she drove to Blackwood Forest carrying only a small wooden box. Morning sunlight filtered gently through the towering pines, replacing the storms that had haunted so many memories. Birds sang overhead, and the breeze stirred fallen needles across the forest floor. The restored gravesite looked peaceful. Fresh grass had begun covering the disturbed earth. A simple stone marked the place where investigators believed the unidentified victim had once rested before the body disappeared forever. No name appeared on the marker. Only a single inscription: May truth give what time could not. Claire knelt before the grave and opened the wooden box. Inside rested the gold wedding ring Daniel had recovered from the empty burial site. She held it carefully between trembling fingers. "My sister," she whispered, "I wish we'd had more than stolen years." Tears slipped silently down her face. "I spent my life searching for someone I never knew was searching for me too." The wind moved softly through the trees. No answer came. None was needed. Claire gently placed the wedding ring upon the stone. For several quiet minutes she remained there, allowing grief, anger, and love to exist together without resistance. At last she stood. She looked once toward the endless rows of pines stretching into the distance. The forest no longer felt like a place that guarded secrets. It had become a place that witnessed them. As she walked away, the burden she carried seemed lighter, though never gone. Some losses could be accepted without ever being repaired. Some wounds healed only enough to let life continue. Behind her, the wedding ring caught a beam of sunlight, shining briefly before disappearing beneath drifting pine needles. Justice had uncovered the truth. Forgiveness had found its own quiet path. But neither could return stolen childhoods, mend broken trust, or restore the lives buried beneath decades of deception. Some graves never stay closed. Neither do the memories waiting inside them.